Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Design Recharge. I'm your host, Diane Gibbs. Sometimes I forget to say that. This is episode 264, maybe? I can't remember. Maybe it's just 54. I'm going to look really fast. 265. I didn't get any of it right. 265. So I am really excited. This whole series sort of ended up being about illustrators and all the things that we could do with illustration, which I think is really cool. And the last person was Josh Cleland, who is done kind of the traditional route of children's book illustration. And these guys, so Jeremy and Beth, Jeremy Slagle and Beth Stafford, they're not married, although Jeremy does sort of look like Ben a little bit from behind maybe, because they both have the same haircut. But they we're going to find out how they found each other and why Beth didn't use her husband to illustrate the book, because I think that's kind of a neat part of the story too. So, but they went a self-publishing route, which I think a lot of times nowadays this is really realistic, maybe even more realistic than trying to go the traditional. But they had a vision. It wasn't all in it for just making tons of dough, but they ended up getting a Kickstarter that was fully funded in 6 days, which I think is unheard of, to be honest. And they really hadn't done a ton. So we're going to even dig into that. So I hope you guys are ready, and we're going to get started right now. So welcome, Beth Stafford and Jeremy Slagle. And then I'm not going to use your last names anymore, so we know you're not married to each other.
Yes,
thank you.
And Jeremy's trying to talk to his dog a little bit.
Like she hasn't been this way all day long, but now she's all anxious and crying in the corner right when I go on video.
We can't see her, or I can't really hear her. Can you hear her, Beth?
No. It's just poodles. I'll tell you.
So if you guys have questions, how the chat works, you can hit chat and then you can type questions. I will make sure we get those questions answered for sure. So we've got people coming from all over the world, and I'm excited that we're going to hopefully, you guys are going to give them a ton of knowledge. So I'm just going to pop in, and if I had asked it to Beth, but Jeremy wants to pop in, absolutely let us know. You can pop in, Jeremy. If it doesn't say your name next to it, feel free. Okay, same for you, Beth.
That's good.
So Beth, you're a designer.
Yes.
You and Ben have your own studio together.
Mm-hmm.
And had you always wanted to write children's books, or is this just because you have a daughter? So, or was this just something that just kind of popped in your head?
Yeah. So I have always enjoyed creative writing. I've done it from a very young age. I used to write poetry, and I was in some competitions for writing. I just always loved doing it. I never thought I would do it professionally. I never really set out with the intention of doing a children's book. I'll just have ideas that come to me every once in a while, but nothing that really stuck as much as this story did when I wrote it. So
there was something that specifically happened, and I don't know how old your daughter was at the time, because I think there's been a process. I mean, I think you said, Jeremy has another podcast. You guys should check it out. It's called Joy Venture Podcast, correct?
Yes.
Can you give me a link, and then I'll put that in the show notes too, but we can also maybe put a link in the chat.
Yeah, it's joyventure.net.
Okay, people, you can get that, right? I'm going to write it down, and I will put it in the show notes. But they did an interview where Jeremy and Beth were interviewed by Jeremy's co-host. Jeremy decided not to be co-host that day, though, so he could be interviewed. And they really talked about this. So how old was your daughter, and then what happened? Because your daughter has a real empathetic characteristic, I think, about her, right?
Yes. Yeah, she does. She was very sweet as a young child, still is. I think it was around the age of 2 that she would just notice, like, if I wasn't feeling well or Ben wasn't feeling well, she'd come up and want to, rub our backs, or she would notice on the show she was watching if someone was in a dangerous situation, and you could see it on her face. And sometimes she'd yell out. Like, she was just very expressive in her care and attention towards others when they were in kind of a sad or difficult scenario. So that was something that Ben and I noticed in her, and we want to be very intentional about building those things up in her. And so we had conversations about how do we encourage that, and how do other kids learn about that, and what are some ways that would help. And so we started talking about, wouldn't that be cool to write a story or do something like that? And that was a conversation we had very specifically one night. And Ben went to sleep, and I just kept thinking about this story, and all of a sudden this idea of a chinchilla came into my head, and I started writing this little rhyming story. So by the time he woke up in the morning, I was like, Ben, I didn't stay up all night or anything, but by the time he woke up, I was like, Ben, I think I have a story. So that's kind of how this story was born.
So one question I asked you was why a chinchilla? And so I think this has to do with not just being a writer, but also being a designer. And so you understand what's in the market, and you understand what's overused. And so can you talk about why a chinchilla and what time? So how many years ago was this?
This was about 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yes. Our daughter's almost 5. So,
okay.
So what was the question again?
Why a chinchilla?
So Ben and I love alliteration. We think that's really fun. And I think the concept of Chin-up Chinchilla and hearing that kind of have the same sound in both words, and the phrasing sounded cool. So that kind of is one of the main reasons, but also just focusing on a character that's not overused. So that gives us more liberty to create what we want to create, and have some creativity with it.
All right. So you and Ben have been married for quite a few years. You know that he's a successful illustrator,
I do
right?
Know that. Yes.
So what happened? Why? And you work together already. So clearly you work well together. What was it? Why was it not working? Because I feel like this is like, I think this, people might be, oh my goodness, are you guys okay? You can't even write your book together? Like, what's wrong with Ben? So what happened, if you don't mind telling us, take us through that part of that story. Because seems like such a ice cube in hot coffee kind of, because you're like, can do this,
Mm-hmm. So I think initially we were really excited about it. And the more we would try to work on it and get some initial sketches done, like we just seemed to not be able to get on the same page. A lot of what he did I actually loved and thought it was great, but it wasn't meeting his personal standards for greatness. And then he would have an idea that he thought was really good, and I would be like, no, that's not really doing it for me. So there was a lot of back and forth. And I think in the end, it was just something that he was too close to. And it was hard for him to get past certain hurdles in his head of what he wanted it to be, and that disconnect between wanting it to be that and not quite knowing how to get there. So I think he basically just said, I really don't want to hold you back with my personal frustrations and getting this right. I think that you should just try to do this and not worry about making me be the person that does it.
So when you have somebody that you work with closely on a regular basis, and then they kind of throw you to the wolves, no offense, Ben, but you kind of just said, hey, you got to go do this. So how did that make you feel? Because I think 2 years is a long time. And I think this is part of your frustration with this project, was that you weren't sure what to do or what the next step was. And I feel like it was a complete God thing that you had to wait these 2 years because you needed to work with Jeremy. But can you kind of take us through that part of the process? Did you feel like you were like, oh, or did you feel like I'm going to find somebody? Was it something you were, really fervently seeking out? Or
I wasn't, because I knew, okay, if Ben's not going to do it, that's fine. And I will someday find someone who can. And I knew that would take a lot of time, because in my head, I'm a designer. I knew that I would want to find somebody and compensate them well for what they're doing for me. And so I knew it would be something that would take time for me to save, to find the right person. So I wasn't in a rush, because I knew I couldn't hurry up and do it anyway in that respect. So it was something that I took comfort in, knowing that the story was still my story and I had it. But I was also kind of just trusting that in God's timing, I would find the right person who could illustrate this book for me.
Because sometimes books can take a while.
Yes.
And sometimes if you work with Jeremy, they're really quick, right? Because Jeremy makes decisions fast.
I don't know if she would say that. It seemed like it took me a while to get the traction going on it, but that's another.
From the outside, if you did it within about a 3 to 6 month period, that seems pretty quick from an outsider perspective, because you have to do all the character and everything. So Jeremy, tell us how you guys met. And really you met Ben first, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I met Ben at a dribble meetup here in Columbus. We had connected earlier than that. I think, is Ben sitting right next to you, by the way? I'm just gonna pull the curtain back a little bit. He is sitting right next to you. He's probably like really irritated that I'm pointing out. Somehow, like, he reached out to me when he was a young designer and asked me to asked if I could be an intern or something like that, and I rejected him. I don't remember what it was. He brought it up one time when we were talking, and we had a good laugh about it. But a few years later, we ended up at a dribble meetup and really, really had a great time. Enjoyed hanging out with him. We were at a place called 16-Bit Arcade here in Columbus, and got to know him pretty well there. And then we got a chance to hang out at the last two Creative South conferences, which is one of my favorite things to do. I look forward to it all year long. But I really admire Ben's ability. His illustration ability is awesome. His design sense is incredible. And so being asked to do this book, really, your question to her, Diane, was the first question that came to my mind. It's like, why isn't Ben doing this? Because he's every bit the illustrator that I am. So you meet then, and the dribble meetup was the beginning, and you live close, but you don't hang out every weekend with these guys, right? No.
So the one thing about doing a dribble meetup or something in your area, which we definitely want to always encourage people to do stuff where they're in their local areas, because you do get to know people, but you don't have the kind of camp feel like what happens when you're at a conference where you're stuck with these people for 3 days. Not stuck. I mean, it's a blessing to be with these people for 3 days.
Right.
But it's the full submersion or immersion, submersion, whatever. Submersion. I just made up a whole new word. But so when you're at a conference and you're with these people, you can really talk. And so when did it come up in conversation that Beth had this story?
So we were out to dinner one night with a bunch of guys, and Ben was sitting next to me at the restaurant, and he basically pulled out his phone and said, "Hey, I want to show you something I'm working on." And so he showed me some character sketches of the chinchilla.
2 years ago then?
This was 2 years ago, yeah.
Okay.
And showed me the character sketches he was doing for the chinchilla. And I thought, oh, those are really, really cute. And he's like, well, my wife wrote a book. And he pulled the copy up for the book and he said, read this. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is the cutest thing ever. This is so great. And in the back of my mind, I've always wanted to do a children's book. And I get contacted by people here and there that have seen my other illustration work on my website, and they want to work with me to do it. But most of the time, when they contact me, it's like, well, I don't have a publisher yet. I need to pitch it to a publisher, but if we do this work together and I get published, then I will pay you for it, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And it just never, especially with someone I don't trust and know, it's never seemed like a good idea to me. So,
right.
So when this came up, I was honestly kind of jealous.
Okay, so, but here's the thing I wanted for people to do. A lot of times people, if they're in these conversations, they just keep it to themselves, like, oh, I really want, but you verbalize this, oh, I really want to do, because there was maybe not jealousy, I think it was excitement, and you were, because I think jealousy could be such a negative thing. I think there's a positive word, another spin on jealousy that's maybe a good word, but I can't think of what it is right now. But I think that's what you were like, in awe, maybe Beth's better with words. Maybe she doesn't know what word I'm talking about either, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know.
So you actually verbalized this to Ben, like, oh, I really would love to work on a children's book one day.
Yeah, I think I did at that time. I'm pretty sure I did. I don't remember all that well, but I think I did. Sure.
Like,
yes,
I think when we were talking about it, you said, I verbalized that. And so then it's in Ben's mind. And then, so sometimes these things have to percolate because they're not just automatic. And it's not like he's just trying to get rid of it. Because at this point, maybe Ben was still working on it. Maybe. He was in the thick of working on it. And that's why he was showing me the concept sketches. It was something he was very much working on at the time. So Joey comes from Hawaii, and Hawaii was under a hurricane. So Joey, I'm glad that you have internet, and I'm super glad that everything, I think, is okay. So I'm just glad, and I was worried about you all night. So I'm glad you're doing okay. Hopefully you're going to the hurricane will miss you completely.
And Joey, if you have a couch that's available, I'm always looking for a place to stay in Hawaii. I'm just throwing that out there. Anyways, back to the show.
She has kids, and she's she says you got it. So there you go. I'll connect you guys later. So why then did it feel right? For you, Beth, when did Ben come home? Because you haven't gone to go to Creative South yet, but hopefully we'll get you there. He comes home. When did he say, hey, what about maybe Jeremy? Because there has to be this kind of conversation at some point. Or was it from this past Creative South?
He actually didn't say any. I mean, he said that he shared the concepts with Jeremy, and he told me, you know, feedback and stuff, but he never at that point was thinking about anybody else doing it. So actually talking to Jeremy and thinking about doing the book was never a planned, calculated ask. It was more of a, we're having a conversation with Jeremy later, a couple years later or something like that, you know, and then we're just talking about children's books, and Ben and I know that we're not making much progress, but that wasn't something we really talked about. And then talking about the book and Jeremy saying he's wanted to do one. And then in that moment, just thinking, how much do you want to do one? Because we have this, you know, idea. So
then when did it come to fruition? When did the ask or the urge come upon your heart to say, hey, do you think I could work with y'all? Or was it you and Ben said to Jeremy, hey, could you maybe do some sketches for us on this?
Well, it happened at a conversation after we did one of the Joy Venture podcasts was it like 9 months ago or something like that?
It was last November, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had gotten together with Jeremy and Thad, and we went out to lunch afterwards, and we were just talking about random things. So the book came up then, and he was talking about how he'd always want to do a children's book. And I said, would you like to do my children's book? And we just found this out that he thought Ben and I planned on asking him that day, but in reality, it was just in that conversation. And in that moment, you know, I wasn't meaning, hey, do you want to necessarily do this as a partner? I just wanted to know if he was even curious, you know, how much would it be? What, you know, things like that. So it was just the very beginning of a conversation, just a spark. Like, is there any interest there? And I think his initial reaction was like, yeah, but we did say, take some time and get back to us, you know, in the next few days. Make sure you really want to do it. So what was some of those factors? And this is the next question. How important was it, Beth, for you to be paired up with somebody who had similar goals for the book and for this whole part? Because this was new for kind of both of you, for illustrating a children's book for Jeremy, and then for you writing, and then doing all the stuff that goes with it. Yeah, so it was very important to me from the start that wanted to be doing this book and felt as passionate about it as I did. And I never wanted him to feel like he was doing this partnership out of an obligation or his joy. So my priority was my relationship with Jeremy, and, you know, Ben's relationship with him too. I wanted to make sure that no matter what happened, that we would be friends and we would enjoy doing this together. So if that meant we started working on the book and he was like, this is too much and I don't want to do it, or whatever it might be, no hard feelings. I would be fine with that. So just that being one thing. And then I think we've just worked really well together. And I think it is because of our perspective. This book is something that's near to our hearts, and we love the message behind it. And we're not getting caught up in a lot of the like profit or promotion. Like, we want to tell people about the book, but it's not because we want to make a ton of money. It's because we want people to love the book and enjoy it and read it to their kids. So all of those things have been great to be on the same page.
So did you, and I'm skipping around a little bit, but Beth, did you and Jeremy create a contract for this project before you began?
No, we didn't. But we said, you always should. I mean, you should if you're doing this professionally. I think because it was a passion project for both of us. And like I just said, like if Jeremy said, I don't want to do this anymore, I would have still had my story. I could have still gone on and had someone else do it down the road. And I would have been disappointed that it didn't work out. But it wasn't something like I needed to hold him to it and he owed me anything. But if you're doing this as a business, if you want to professionally have a book made, if you're hiring somebody to do it, you should always have a contract and make sure that it states like your expectations and what you're getting and what you're paying, because you should be paying people to do it. So, like I would recommend doing a contract, although we didn't. Do you have anything to add to that, Jeremy?
One of the things I'm always blown away by whenever I go to conferences is the importance of a personal project. And so often personal projects are not something you do because you're trying to make extra money. It's something that it's something like, I've always wanted to do this. It's an opportunity that comes along once in a lifetime. And it's just kind of like all the stars align, and you're just like, half the time for me starting a personal project is taking all the time to figure out what the personal project is going to be. And in this situation, it was like a personal project that got dropped in my lap. And I knew, because I had heard the book earlier and talked with Ben about it. And then, a year or so later, reconnected on it. And it was like, oh my gosh, that book that I was jealous about, I get to do now, is just really, really cool. And I knew it needed to be done. I needed to do it. And so to me, it's not about money. I mean, this is one of those projects that, like, if it ends up being something that I get to do more children's books because of this down the road, that would be awesome. I don't know I honestly don't know what God has for me at the end of this, but it's definitely for neither Beth nor I. Neither of us are trying to launch a career with this book,
right?
Or even make a huge pivot in our careers at all. Like, I love what I do, and I would love to do some more children's books. This would be great. But to me, this project specifically, and the reason I didn't feel the need to have a contract with them, it never even crossed my mind, honestly, is just because I know them and I know they're people of character, and I knew that, this is something that was very, very valuable and important to her. And so I'm being very, very careful to treat it that way and make sure that, that we work together on it. And they've been amazing, amazing partners on this project. So
this is always more of a team. It always had that team feel. And it was also really important that you both had clear expectations of what the other one was going to be doing. And even before we hit record and before we hit broadcast, when it was just the three of us, y'all were talking about some stuff on the Kickstarter. And so you're divvying things up. So when you do a children's book, she's written it, but she's a designer. So she has art director, things that are going to come up. And then you are an art director as well. You're an illustrator. So how did that, when you're divvying up the workload, because the illustrations can be, did she say, hey, I want to see some character designs, or you have already done this in the past, so you kind of just plopped some of character designs in? Do you know what I mean? Or like, did you have a way that you were going about it, or did Beth say, hey, I want this, can you show me this? Or
I think Beth and Ben shared with me some mood boards, some things that they had kind of liked and were resonating with them. And what I liked about that was it seemed to be the way I would go about doing it too. I work in several different styles of illustration, but everything I do is all it's all vector based. I don't do anything in Photoshop. I don't mess around with stuff like that. I love Illustrator. And so that was like one focus that I knew that was going to be it. But other than that, I really tried to throw out any preconceived ideas as to what I would want. And I'm kind of a nostalgic person. Like, I love stuff that reminds me of my childhood. I love the books my mom used to read me, little golden books, and those, the vintage Disney books and stuff like that. And so just the flat color, the brush strokes and some of that stuff, that whatever can be accomplished with a vector, kind of drew me into it. So I was able to focus down pretty quickly. And then from there, it was just really working from simple shapes, trying to keep it as simple as possible. This is geared towards 4 or 5 year olds.
So one of the things I love about this book is that it's about empathy, and it's not it's not just a story that there's an end. It actually is a conversation starter. And that's one of the things I think I think it's, I don't have kids, so I don't read a ton of these books, but I remember the books from when I was a kid. And then I do buy some children's books because I'm a really heavy reader, but, and I really like illustrations, but there's not always this conversation aspect or this kind of, let's talk about this. This seems like a really neat, maybe it is something normal. Do a lot of books do that now?
I think there are some. Yeah, I've noticed with books we've gotten for Rue, but it's usually when there's teachable moments attached to the story and you want your kid to think about it. And I don't know if all parents can read a book and then automatically formulate questions that they would ask their kids to think about it. So we thought it would be nice to add questions that would naturally guide kids, like, has there been a time when you felt sad and somebody's helped you feel better, and different things like that. So getting kids to even further empathize with the character or think about specific times in their lives, that all just helps build a memorable moment around the book.
So
the topic of empathy.
So, one of the things is that the little friend, the hedgehog.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do they have names? I mean, they don't have a name in the book, I know, but like, did you name them, Jeremy? Beth?
I did not know.
Okay. So the hedgehog kind of sees his friend, and the chinchilla is sort of sad looking, and really you go through these things. Hey, why is this guy sad? And it's, instead of just being like assuming, that it's kind of starts thinking about why, teaching people, adults or children, to be more empathetic. And so one of the things that I loved was there were all these other scenarios. Oh, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. And I liked that part. Brian just asked curious if Ben played a role throughout the project. The reason I asked is because he's working on a project with a husband and wife team, and one of them is more involved in the process than the other is feeling left out. Wondering if you all went through that and how you got through that. So was that, Beth, can you tackle that one?
Yeah, I think Ben was still a huge help to me because he has an eye for things that I don't sometimes, and he'll catch things that I don't. So where I'm just like, yeah, everything's fine. He's like, well, actually, there's this little detail, like maybe you should consider adding an eyebrow. And so I'm like, oh, yeah, like it's so good to have more input. So there was nothing that we've done that Ben hasn't seen, no decision we've really made that Ben hasn't also been a part of that decision. So as much as like his name isn't on the front of the book, but he has put a ton of time and care into making it as awesome as it is too. So yeah, I couldn't have done it without him too.
If there was somebody who was doing this, and so from Jeremy, if this was from your perspective and Ben wasn't involved, is this something where you would probably try to get him more involved so that it wasn't like you were leaving him out? If you were doing this again, or if you had another husband-wife team that you were working with?
Are you asking me that question?
I am. I'm asking you, Jeremy. I'm sorry.
So I think the difference is, Beth and I talk about this a lot. This is a very unique situation. This whole agreement and the way we're doing things. So I think if I was working with another husband and wife team, like as a graphic designer, I do a lot of work with a husband who owns a business, and sometimes he co-owns it with his wife, and she's very close to it. So I always make sure when I'm doing a new branding process, if she's going to have an opinion, she needs to be there for the meetings. Like I need to know her thoughts on things. And typically these are non-creative people. These are people that have like come up with a business that makes and sells widgets or sandwiches or something like that.
Right.
So,
right.
But the worst thing is when you're like creating something for the wife, and then she's like, oh no, he's not going to have an opinion. And then you go through the whole creative process, and then like you get like silence. Like she doesn't talk to you for 4 days after you talked with her last time. And she's like, well, my husband just has some concerns, and it's just like, oh, but in this situation, because it's Ben and Beth, they're both creatives, and both of their opinion and their design sense and their skills are valuable. I've not had, and I will tell you that the first time I sent sketches over, I was terrified. because I respect them greatly. And I have, a lot of times I have that, what's the term for it? Like imposter syndrome, especially when I'm stepping into a world of stuff I've never done before. Like I've never done a children's book. So, you know, and I know they have high standards. So I'm like working feverishly to come up with something that's like, is it good enough to present yet? Does it have, you know, is it there close enough? Will they be able to see this as just concept at this point? But they were really receptive to my first sketches and gave some really great feedback. And it wouldn't be, the illustrations wouldn't be what they are had it not been for them being a really great partner in giving me really great feedback and direction on it too. So.
Okay. So Brian says the husband and wife team are also both creatives. I think figuring out everybody's official role. So that's having expectations, clear expectations throughout the process is the most important. And for him in that project. So I think it is really important that the roles are divided or the roles are clear. So you're kind of in a honeymoon phase. Now, granted, you've been through a ton of hard work, but now you have this fully funded Kickstarter, and now there will be time coming through December or beginning of December where it's going to be crunch. Thank goodness you guys live close enough that maybe you can do shipments or do something where you're doing some of that together. But how does that work? So now that you have something that actually is going to be funded and there may be something coming, is there now, do you step back and say, hey, we're just doing a 50-50 split? Is there ownership of the book? Is there, you know, copyright by the illustrations, and that's Jeremy, and then copyright of the words by Beth or Happy Cargo Books? How does that work out? Because this may be something that it's a dream. Like this is all happening and it's great. And this is absolutely the perfect time if you're going to make a contract. If you don't have one already, it's great because you both are super happy with each other right now, right? So how would you, and maybe it's not the way you're going to do it because you totally trust each other and you have a really good friendship. But sometimes this can be, you know, the perfect storm for disaster because you think it's your friends and you're doing everything's fine and, you know, nobody would do anything to hurt. But you know what I mean? Like it could come up.
Yeah, I think Diane's just convinced me. Beth, I want a contract or I'm out. I'm walking.
That's not what I mean. I'm just trying, because sometimes what happens is, and it doesn't sound like this is the case in this way, but I also feel like maybe you guys have a unique relationship that some people are going to end up doing more work, or some people want more. And I know that this is one of the things that you guys had from the beginning, that this was about the joy of making this and getting this message spread more than about making money. But then somehow the money somebody has to take care of the money. Somebody has to say, this is what's happening with the money. And how does that work out? So, I mean, it's really kind of, if you don't want to talk about it, you can just say, please skip to number 5 and we'll just skip on.
I think the part of it is, it's funny because Beth and I had this very conversation this morning. What is it this book is, this story has been something that she has had on her mind and created over the last 2 years. And while we're partners in this, to me, it's like, she's the one that at some point is going to need to decide, like, are we going to just buy what we have are we going to just get what we have from the Kickstarter and then just kind of say, yay, that was fun, and just sell through whatever we have? Or is it something where she's like, you know, this is something I really want to do more. I'd really like to go to, you know, send this stuff out to different places, or set up a booth and sell books or whatever. Or
sheet sets or cards or whatever. Or do we want to shop it around to publishers and see if they're interested in it, you know? And I know Beth has other books in her head that she's already written and some ideas. So to me, it's like, we're going to need to figure out before the end of this, like, what does she want to do with this? And one of the things Beth said early on is, if this thing doesn't get funded, obviously this is before we started the Kickstarter, but she's like, if this thing doesn't get funded, I'll just go out and print one so I have a copy. And so to me, this is less of a design project and it is more like a fine art project in some ways. It's kind of like,
we're designing something just for the sake of creating something that we want to do and we feel called to do. If somebody wants to jump on board and buy it from us, that's great. As it stands right now with the Kickstarter campaign, I think the reason we were successful, aside from the fact that we have amazing friends and family and people that have, in the creative community that have really come around us to do this, is that we use Kickstarter the way Kickstarter is meant to be used. Kickstarter is not designed to launch a career. It's always been, from the beginning, a way to produce a piece of art or something you created and actually get enough people to support it that you could actually make it a thing. And that's really what we've done. So the $7,500 that we have for the goal is enough money for us to make the thing and ship them out.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't
just production. Doesn't cover your illustration costs, doesn't cover the writing costs and all the stuff that goes into finding printers and all that stuff. Correct?
Yeah. So it covers all of our expenses. It covers the sticker packs and the bookmarks and the little blanket that's coming with some of the orders, and all of that stuff. But I think Beth and I would both say that the amount of time that this thing has taken, we'd have to do really, 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 really well on the Kickstarter campaign, like way overfund it to pay ourselves back for the amount of time we've put in.
Right.
This. But that's not been that. This goes back to, this is a personal project. I've wanted to do this, and if
you're happy, if it just gets funded, you get it out, you're happy because you've met your goals. Even before it was funded, you would have been happy walking away from this.
Yeah. And honestly, Beth and I would, to be completely honest with you, up until the day we launched the Kickstarter campaign, we were talking about like, okay, so, we've had friends that have launched Kickstarters in the past. I've had many friends that have launched Kickstarters in the past, and a lot of them set a reserve of money aside so that like if 7,500 is what their goal is, but they only get to 6,500, man, it'd be a shame to leave that $6,500 on the table. So you have a friend throw $1,000 in at the last minute of your own money so that you get it across the line. So we're just like thinking about like, do we do that? How much at what point are we willing to do that? And then for us to meet the goal in 5 days just completely floored us.
Because it was last week, just so people know. So you guys launched on Wednesday of last week.
In 1 week.
And by the next day, day 2, you were at 66%. Day, I kind of kept track. So I think day 3 or 4, you were 88%. And then day 5, it was right at you were 96, 98% day 5. And then obviously day 6, you had 100% funding. And now you're overfunded, but I haven't been keeping up. Now that you got 100%, I'm not that I'm out, but I totally am like, at least you're there, what. So those are the next questions to ask about the Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. But that's it's really fast because Kickstarters can go for, I think there's a short one, a regular one, which is the 30 days. And then there's a little bit longer one. Maybe it's a 2-month or something like that. I can't remember. But you did just the normal 30 days. And in 5 days, you were pretty much fully funded. I mean, which is amazing. And we're going to get into that in a minute. But so with this, it's owned, I guess, by Happy Cargo Books, right, Beth?
Yeah. So we're splitting the copyright between I will copyright the text and he will copyright the images.
Good.
We have everything living under Happy Cargo Books for now because in the event that we do create more books, we wanted to have a place for all of those to live instead of it just being Chin-up Chinchilla,
right?
Branded. So we thought we would have a place for them to live together, but we will split up the rights individually.
All right. So here's another question, and then we'll go back into more of this kind of stuff with the split.
Okay.
So how did revisions work? So I know that, Jeremy, you were getting revisions from Beth and Ben. They were giving you feedback, but you would submit. You were doing a lot of these on your iPad. I don't know if you want to hold up your iPad or show some of your illustrations, because that was how you were working. You were using some retro supply brushes, but then you also made your own brushes. So then what kind of, were you producing spreads, or were you producing scenes, or how did it work? And then when would you present? Would you present it when it was all finished? Would you present a couple spreads at a time?
So initially I'm sitting here I'm looking at Procreate and I'm trying to find the actual sketches. I know I have them.
Well, I can try to pull them up on my email. So
yeah, I reorganized it yesterday and I must have reorganized it way too well because oh, here we go.
Okay.
So yeah, so a lot of it, and these are not great. Like they're really kind of horrible actually, but they were just kind of doing some quick sketches on, just what are these characters? This was the hedgehog. It ended up looking way different than this. And I'm really glad because I'm not thrilled with any of these. But a lot of it was that. A lot of it was like, this is one of the sketches. This page ended up changing significantly. We ended up cropping in on the character itself to do this, which I think was a lot better way to do it. But you can kind of get an idea. Like this is sort of the sketches that I'm working on. Very rough, just some simple character study type sketches. But the goal, I don't think I presented anything to them at this stage. I wanted to kind of flesh them out a little bit more. So adding some color and all that, and then kind of submitted an early stage. The chinchilla was gray originally, ended up changing the colors up a bit to make him a little more fun and more fun for kids to look at and stuff like that. So, but yeah, that's how I started. And then once the characters were designed, it's at that point, because this is a relatively simple book, once that was defined and the textures and the colors and just kind of the overall color palette was identified, that it wasn't that hard to kind of figure out what each page was going to look like. I had it in my mind. And I know when you're doing cinema, usually there's an establishing shot, which is kind of like a wide shot to help the reader know where the person is. And then there's usually a tighter shot where now we're focusing in on what's the attention. And you'll notice if you look through the book, it's paced this way. Mm-hmm. So I kind of took what I knew from the way cinema works and the way, other children's books, and kind of thought through it. And I wanted to make sure that as they flip through it, the backgrounds change and some are brighter than others, some are darker than others, that there's a good pace to the whole book. So,
and this is, how many pages is this book, Beth?
36 pages total, but that includes like title page and stuff like that.
Right. So then of the story, so you're working out, because there's some thanks at the end, I think, mm-hmm. Thank you page, and then there's the questions kind of at the end as well. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I think is great to work with Jeremy is that I asked him, I was like, well, how long did you think this took you? And he said, I don't know, maybe, if you're looking at start to finish, we were working on so many other projects at the same time, but he does work really fast. He said he's not a noodler, which I think is a lot of designers have that problem of, they would show those original sketches and then be like, oh, well, and then they kind of noodle back and forth. Now they're noodling with you and with themselves, right? So I think maybe that's something, I think Jeremy's really good at making decisions and then knowing when to present. Did you feel like that was the way, Beth?
Yeah, like when he would send me something, I would just look at it and be like, this is great. My reaction most of the time was like, yeah, this is awesome. And if there were edits, they were usually just minor things. I tried really not to be, hopefully he thinks I wasn't, like a micromanager of the project, and letting him use his skills because I knew he had them. And then just really looking if there was anything that was like glaring or stood out to me that needed to be tweaked. But I think because we had that back and forth and Ben was involved, it became so much better. And that's a real testimony to working together with anybody, like letting other eyes see your work, people who you trust, who have a good eye for things, because they might see something that you don't when you're close to it.
Absolutely. I think having somebody who can look at your work with a good constructive criticism that can also be encouraging is mm-hmm. amazing. So here's one of the things I also think is really good about Jeremy is that he makes quick decisions, or he doesn't, if he makes a decision and it wasn't the same decision he would have made today that he made yesterday, He's okay with it. It's just part of life. It's part of growth. And I think that's acceptance. And I don't know if you think that way, Jeremy, or not, but just from talking to you, that's a really, that's a hard lesson to learn. I don't know how you've learned that lesson, or if it's just a natural, like you were always like that, even as a kid. But I think not second guessing or being okay, knowing that today you're going to make better decisions than you made yesterday, and being okay with that.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, I think it's really important for me. I'm one of those people who, if I'm working on a client project, it's usually done. The project's usually done 3 or 4 days before I actually have to present. I grew up super ADD, and I always waited till the last minute to do my homework. And I always waited till the last minute to do stuff. It caused me so much stress as a child. And I learned somewhere around high school, that the stress I was putting on myself was the fact that I was just procrastinating all the time. And so one of the things I love is, like, I love if I have something that's due for presentation to a client on Friday, I usually have it done on Tuesday or Wednesday, like done in the can, in presentation. Now, some people, there's a lot of designers out there. I've worked with many of them, and I've been guilty of this every once in a while myself. You keep going back to that presentation going, if I could just fix that one little thing is bugging me. You could fill those next 3 days with just going back to that design and just noodling and noodling and noodling and really not making it any better.
Right.
And so for me, it's good for me to take just a few, to separate myself at least a night of sleep or a little bit of time between when I finish something to maybe look at it and go, you know what? It's good. It's good. It's great. It's good to present and that, or I need to address that thing, because sometimes it's like you don't see it in the moment when you create it. And there were a few spreads in this book where I presented it to them, and then the next day I looked at it and I was just like, yeah, I'm just not feeling this. And I said, and I completely redid the page and said, what do you think about if we do it this way? And they were like, love it. So it wasn't even necessarily because they didn't like it or push back. It was because I just looked at it with fresh eyes in the morning and realized the pacing, and especially I think the biggest part of this took place when I started laying all the illustrations in InDesign, and I could see one page with the next page with the next page. And I went, oh man, those pages, I'm starting to see a pattern here we need to break up. And some of the feedback on that Ben and Beth gave me was like, well, we've got a few light pages. Let's do one with a really dark background here. And it really helps with the mood, and it helps set the page off before and the page after. So when you're looking at an illustration, like in isolation, they all look great because you're jumping back and forth all over the place so you get them done. But when you start to put them all into a document and you see them next to each other, you start to realize, oh, okay, I need to play with scale. I need to play with the layout. Like on this one, I've got the copy on the left side and the character on the right, but maybe on the next page we switch it up and do it this way, or we crop in really tight on this one. We go wider on the next one. So.
All right. So I definitely think things always change when you put it in InDesign, right?
Yes.
So did you do your type in InDesign, or did you do your type in Illustrator also?
Everything I have right now, except for like all the content that's in like the opening pages and stuff like that. Anywhere the type is set on a curve, I did it in Illustrator.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So this is Katiana has a question. She's also writing some children's books and has a kind of Christian publishing company that she's doing as a parent company, going to have some books underneath to kind of give you an idea of where she's coming from. And she's learning all this on her own, as we all are. So, okay. I'm sorry. So sorry. I'm sorry. I don't know. Okay. So, are you guys going to trademark your series as you develop your brand? Because again, copyright is anybody can get a copyright. You don't have to apply for a copyright. Trademark you have to pay for, and it's a little bit longer process, but it's still easy to do. And then are you going to merchandise any characters or to help in branding? Do you have any plans for that?
I think we're trying to get a book done.
Yeah. Okay. It depends. If this is wildly successful, maybe someday. But yeah, our goal was never to, that would be a dream. But our goal was never that far out. Our goal was just the book. And so it looks like that's going to happen. We're excited.
Okay.
But definitely that would make sense to do if we wanted to make this into something bigger.
Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely, I agree. Great questions. Okay, so this is kind of going back, I guess, to we'll go to the Kickstarter in a second. So Beth and Jeremy both. So the goals of the project was just to kind of create something that was this joyful project for you guys. Any personal goals? Beth, did you have any personal goals that you wanted to achieve that that have been achieved or maybe haven't been achieved yet?
I guess not to be redundant, but my main goal was just to have a book that I could hold and read to my child. And so that's probably going to happen now. I'm very excited. I think if someday a child held this book and said it was their favorite, that would be amazing to me. A kid who doesn't owe me anything, you know, but to them it means something. So,
right.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
So Jeremy, what about you?
I don't have any other goals besides getting this book in people's hands. I honestly haven't thought beyond that. There's some it'd be nice to kind of things. It would be great to do another children's book. It'd be great to be approached by someone else who's like, hey, I like your style. I like the way you worked on this. I'd like to do another book with Beth. There's other projects I'd love to do. But this, you know, even if this thing just kind of puts me in front of people I wouldn't have otherwise had an opportunity to do work for, or even more than that, I've learned a lot just about illustration style, kind of taking a step back from the way I usually do things and approaching it from a different direction. I've learned a ton about Illustrator and just kind of the way I would approach character design and stuff like that too. So it's already been good.
So Sven says this, and I think this is great information. You need to register for copyright to get the full protection. So definitely. Copyright is for creative works. Trademark is for conducting business. And just so you guys know, I think in 2 or 3 weeks, I have a copyright attorney coming on. So we're going to be talking about all kinds of things that have to do with copyright. So if you guys want to listen to that, you should come back. All right. So Beth, how was God's hand in this story? And how did you manage to keep up this dream and the momentum for 2 years before you really got it together with finding the perfect illustrator to get you to this? And how did you get through those times when it kind of felt like, I mean, maybe it wasn't in the front burner all these times, but it sometimes can feel like, oh, I had this dream and I'm just having to back burner it. And sometimes that can be very hopeless or frustrating. How did you see God's hand in this story?
So when I wrote the book, I was very excited about it and I shared it with some people. And over the past 2 years, I would still share it with people here and there, like, hey, did you know that I wrote a book? And then I'd read it. And every time I would read it to someone, they would say, oh, you have to make this book. I want to have a copy of that book. And so just putting myself out there to share it with people was a constant encouragement, because maybe I wouldn't think about it or talk about it for a while, and then it would come up and someone would reaffirm that. And then I would think, okay, I really can't give up. And so I've had some really great friends who have encouraged me to not give up, including Ben, who really encouraged me to get this done. And I think even though I didn't know it at the time, now looking back, I can see, wow, I waited, but I'm so glad I did, because Jeremy partnered with me on this, and it is far beyond what I expected to ever come from this project. So I think it says a lot about waiting for God's timing and not getting discouraged by the moments where things aren't happening as fast as you think they could. Because if I would have forced this, I considered just drawing something and printing it for myself, I would have been the only person that knew about this book. It wouldn't have been that great looking, but now it is something that hundreds of people will have, and it's something that's a beautiful book, and hopefully that message can spread farther than if I was just selfish and held on to it. So I see that God really put the people in my life to keep me going, and put Jeremy in my life to help me make this a reality. And now there's just all these people who are also supporting and sharing about it on Kickstarter. I've been blown away by that. So I feel his love, and I trust his timing more because of this project.
That's cool. That's an awesome way to look at it for sure. It reminds me of like, when I don't remember what this is called, but it was in the 90s, people would fall off a stage and then you would be handled all around, which maybe is a little creepy. But it sort of feels like if you do it all on your own, you can't float around a crowd. You have to have all trust falls maybe. But I think
Stage diving.
Stage diving, yeah.
Yeah.
And people crowd surfing. Brian had it. So, and people are passing you around. That's what ends up happening because you let God have his timing. So Matt has a question that I want to make sure that we get, and it has to do with the Kickstarter. So what prep work was done ahead of time to help you juice up your amazing Kickstarter? And this was a lot. I know Jeremy said this was probably the most stressful part was last week or the week prior as you were getting ready to prep for the Kickstarter. From what I know, from what Jeremy and I had talked about and what you and me had talked about, Beth, was you guys hadn't done a ton of extra stuff. You'd done some. I know there were some things you had done reaching out to people, but what were some of the things that you did to help the Kickstarter have such a really potent launch? Jeremy.
Okay. So we put together kind of a social media kit that that basically we emailed out to people that were friends, family, clients, everybody that we knew pretty much, that was a templated email that basically gave people kind of the gist of what we were going to be doing. It linked them to our existing Chin-up Chinchilla page that hadn't gone live yet, so they could read a little bit about it. And then it had attachments. It had like Instagram ready images that were already attached to it, along with copy and paste this into Twitter, copy and paste this. And if you don't have what you need in order to write something about this, it also had a link to a downloadable PDF so they could read the entire book. Because we didn't want to send it out and have people commenting or promoting something that they couldn't get behind. So we gave them the opportunity to download it, password protected, so they could kind of read and see the whole book from front to back. And then the opportunity for them and we kind of teed that up, 3 days? I think 3 days ahead of time. I think we sent that out on Monday. Kickstarter happened on Wednesday. And we got just so many people emailing us back right away. Just like, oh yeah, we're so super excited about this. This is going to be great. I've already added it to my calendar. I'll be the first person to do this on Wednesday. And there was a lot of work involved in that. And then obviously leading up to doing a Kickstarter campaign, you have to shoot a video and edit all that and get this, find the right stock music for it. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into prepping and getting ready for that.
How long did that part take? So you guys had to come together, you had to shoot the video, you had to do the editing. How long ahead of time did you guys do that?
The week before.
Okay.
Yeah.
So pretty soon.
Yeah. So originally we were looking at a September 1 date to start this. And I'm one of those people, this goes back to my need to just like make a decision and move. Mm-hmm. And I think I would have gone out of my mind because I would have having that much time before we're actually going to get started. So I just said, what if we also did some research on when's a good time of the month, good time of the week, good time of the year to launch a Kickstarter campaign. A lot of people said the middle of the month is a great time to do it. It also happened to land on a Wednesday, which people say is a great time to do it. So I just threw it out there like, what if we move this up 2 weeks? And to me, that just allowed me to have a deadline that I needed to meet as far as getting that video shot, scheduling all that. So Ben and Beth came down to Columbus and they had friends meet us. We have this unbelievably beautiful library here in Columbus. And so we shot some stuff down there. We came to my studio, shot some stuff here. I think I did all the shooting and editing and audio. And then I compiled it all together like within the next day or two, and we were ready to roll.
I mean, I know it was under Beth's Kickstarter, so really you're divvying up some of those responsibilities, and what didn't feel like, oh, it was all Jeremy's to do this, and it was all Beth's to do this. So did you guys have like a day where you're like, I can do this, can you do this?
So one awesome thing that we discovered during this process was Dropbox paper. It's a good tip for all you people. Okay.
Dropbox paper is amazing.
Yeah.
So what is it?
So it's like a document, kind of like a Google Doc, except it's just cleaner and super easy to use, and we can edit it together, which I know you can do Google Docs, but we would create to-do lists and we could tag each other in them. And we made tables that had contact lists, and we could throw in images for proofing. So it was just an awesome resource. So we made a really long to-do list and broke it up into sections like advertising, promotion, Kickstarter rewards, all these things that we needed to make sure we didn't forget. And then we would tag each other and leave comments so that we could address those things. And so that was one awesome tool. We loved doing that. And we really work closely, like we've been having morning checkup calls where we'll just talk, run through things now that things are going. But there was a lot of back and forth. And I told Jeremy, I feel like this was like a school project where you're partnered with someone, but you're both carrying the weight of the work. So it doesn't feel like, I never have felt like I'm doing everything. Hopefully Jeremy doesn't feel that way either. Like, no. I know he's done a lot of work with the illustrations, and once the book was written, I didn't have a ton of like book involvement, but there was a ton that I could be doing to work on this Kickstarter. So like figuring out rewards, writing those things up, sending emails to people. So I tried to take as many things off his plate as I could so that he could focus on the things that he was really good at. So I think it was a really nice balance.
And something that I've learned about myself to that same thing I was talking about earlier, because of my ADD, I can be hyper focused on stuff. And then I think that goes to why I'm able to do things quickly. If I'm hyper focused on something, I can just tear through stuff. But, I'm getting notifications sometimes on Dropbox paper, and every time Beth tags me on something, it pops up and stuff. And so later in the day, did you see that? I'm like, I haven't had any time whatsoever to look at that because I'm just so focused on the illustrations. And it's like, I promise I will get off this train by the end of the day today, and I will address all that stuff. But Beth is so organized and so like detail oriented. And so like all the math stuff that had to be done as far as figuring out the cost and the shipping. I mean, if you miscalculate the shipping on something like this, it can eat your lunch.
Yeah, I think the Good Type book, she talked about that it was really, she hadn't expected it to be as expensive. And I know I have another friend who I interviewed a while ago, Justin Hillgrove. He did this Imps and Monsters, but it's just his paintings, but it's all super cute kid stuff. But it's a big book, and it can really be expensive. Well, that was the thing with the plush blankets or the blankets that you're doing. It's like, if you don't have a distributor or you don't have someone to print that already or to control that, I think it can be you will be in the hole going in, and that has to do with that 50-50. So if we're in the hole going in, is that $100 from Jeremy and $100 from Beth that comes in? And those are where those contracts can help come, just even for great friends. I always feel like partnerships should,
right.
I don't know. You might want to, my dad's an attorney, so maybe it's just,
this is a plug for your dad. Yeah. So another thing we've done is I created a spreadsheet where I've listed out expenses. So if I've put money in to order maybe like stickers or something, and he's put money in to buy the songs for the video, like I'm keeping track of how much we're each putting in so that we know, like, if there's compensation to be had for the monetary input we've had, then we'll know how to split that up fairly. So I'm trying to keep track of everything to make sure that this is as much of a 50-50.
Yeah.
It sounds like great communication, respect for each other, and then being able to feel like you could be heard, and also feel like you can share where you're want feedback and give feedback. I think the communication has been really key.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a couple more questions, then I know we're already over our time. So Krishna says, how did you figure out reward items and their price tiers? Because I do think that can be really, and especially if you go for this next, once you get funded, there's other incentives people will incentivize to get to another level. She's listening while she works. So how did you figure out that stuff, and how are you going to go forward figuring out the next tiers if you're going to do that? Beth.
Oh,
sorry.
I think she looked. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, there's a little glitch. So we figured out our rewards by looking at other successful book campaigns that were similar to ours on Kickstarter. And so I actually made a Google Paper doc and listed out like all their rewards that they had and what they offered, because what we wanted to do was make sure that our rewards were not adding so much to our cost that it was making it more difficult for us to cover the book costs. So we knew off the bat that we wanted our end goal to be a low number, so picking rewards that wouldn't be a huge additional cost to us was important. Because I know a lot of people do things that are very extravagant and cool, but that's not what we were about in this case. And then picking things that are relatively flat so that it can ship together with the book was another important thing, or having some digital offerings so that we could do things without shipping. So we wanted to make sure those things were covered, and also that there was something for everybody. We want to make sure if you just want a book, that's cool, but maybe you want a couple, and so let's give that as an option. Or maybe you want a whole bunch, and let's throw that in there, and with a few added perks like a print or the activity kit that we created. So we wanted to keep it simple, have 10 or less. We didn't want it to get too crazy that people would be paralyzed by the decisions that they had to make. And then we wanted to make sure that it would be something simple to actually produce in addition to the book.
Gotcha. So what was something, Beth, what was something that you learned during this project that resulted in significant growth for you? And it could be a personal thing. It could be, just a time management thing, working with Dropbox paper. But what was something that you can look back? I mean, obviously there's a faith component as well, because it took a long time and you had to decide. But what, if anything, did you learn?
I guess from a high level, I've learned that, I guess looking at it, it seems so daunting at the beginning. Any way you approach making a book is daunting. Like sending it out to publishers or getting an agent is likely what you'd have to do. Like that seemed daunting to me. Or, trying to do this all on my own would be very daunting. But Kickstarter, there's so much work. And you're the only one that's going to do it. Nobody else does. So I just kind of at the beginning thought, can I even do this? And that was a little paralyzing. But having a great partner in Jeremy, having Ben's support, and just like asking other people who have done this, I'm just kind of surprised that it all came together. It all came together. I could do it. And that feels like really satisfying to say this thing seemed like something I could never do, but here I am doing it. And I know that God helped me along the way to get here. So that's something I learned, that I could do something that seemed impossible. And I'm happy about that.
That's awesome. How about you, Jeremy?
I may need you to restate the question, because I've been mesmerized by the chat thing on the right side of the screen. And going back to my focus issues, I completely missed your question.
No worries. You can click chat and then it will go away.
I just did. I'm having problems. So
it's okay. So what I asked was, what have you learned during this project that resulted in significant growth for you?
I would echo what Beth was saying. Just, it seemed, I do a men's Bible study that meets at my house on Wednesdays. And Dylan Menges is a friend of mine that a lot of you probably know. He meets with us, and then Thad Devassi, who's my co-host for Joy Ventures there, and a couple other guys. We just have a great time together. It's just been really great support from them, but they just keep saying, this thing's going to get funded, right? This thing's going to get funded. And I remember last Wednesday. So we met last Wednesday before we kicked off the campaign, and then we met again this morning, and I got a good talking to by these guys, because they were like, we told you so. But to me, what I've learned is that it's not about what I think or what I want. It's about what God has planned. And like I said, I was worried about having to go on a 30-day marathon to get this thing done. And what are we going to do? It was causing me stress in my chest that I was going to be doing this for 30 days. And so this morning, these guys were just like, hello, 6 days. What did we tell you? And so it's not about what I want or how I would make something happen. It's God's timing is always perfect.
For sure. it's funny because we try to hold on so much often, and sometimes it's just about letting go because we can't control those things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you were over halfway done in a day.
That day was insane. That day, I mean, I had the Kickstarter website up live, and I was like, $1,000. Oh my gosh, we hit $1,000. And then like we're going back and forth. And I remember I sent at the $3,000 mark, I sent a text. I was like, oh my gosh, we just hit 3K. And she's like, whoa, I'm giving Rue a bath. So I stepped away from the computer for a minute. It's just like, it was crazy that first day. Like I was so moved and so grateful. And like, I can't tell you, like I would have never in a million years thought we would have even made $1,000 on the first day. I mean, it completely blew us away.
So, I think I know the answer to this, but would you two work together again? And what's next for both of you? Jeremy, you going to do another book with somebody else, or are you going to write another book, Beth? Or what? I think you guys would work together from just what I'm seeing. I mean, you're halfway through, right? This Kickstarter. It seems like the Kickstarter was a really good, I think, do you think you would do another Kickstarter as well? Beth?
Yeah, if nothing else happens, like, someone wants to pick up this book and sell it for real, I would love to. I mean, I have a couple other books along the same vein as this, a little different, teaching empathy in different scenarios. Not a chinchilla, different animals. So there could be some really fun things to do with that. And if Jeremy wanted to do it, I would want him to continue to be the illustrator for it. So it does all depend on the time. And I want to make sure that neither one of us gets burnt out because this isn't our full-time job. We're not getting paid for any of the stuff we're doing. So we still have to do, work for clients. So if time and God allows, I would love to work with Jeremy again.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'd love to do it again. I think the good thing is that both of us came into this with the approach of let's just do something fun and see what God does with it. And so that's really the way I would approach anything beyond this. And so like one of the things I talked with Beth about this morning on our call was, what do you want to do with this? This is your baby. Like this is something that it was your idea and something that like when she gets teary-eyed sometimes when we start talking about some of this stuff. And it's been really awesome, but she is while I'm attached to it because I got to make it look pretty. She's the one that really has the heart for it. And a lot of it comes down to, and Happy Cargo Books is something that's under Fox Meadow Creative. If there's another book in there, I would love to do that. I don't know.
You're putting your hat in the ring.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a blast. This has been the least lucrative, most fun thing I've done in a long time.
But that's what we need sometimes. Sometimes we have to do those passion projects that do fuel us for something else, but they also show us where our gifts are.
Oh yeah, and I'm having to remind myself I've got paying work I got to get to because I'm just having so much fun working on this.
So with the Kickstarter, there's a lot of underlying things that you kind of have to do. And I know you did some prep and you sent things to friends. I know that you did a tutorial with Dustin Lee of Retro Supply. Was that part of just that the 3-day push? You said, hey, I can do this, or did you contact him like a month before and say, hey, I have this? Because I also think that would be a great way to, if it's timed right, then it's somebody else sharing your stuff, and it's also you're giving content to them that their audience will appreciate. How because that seems like some strategy in there. Did you do that a lot of times, or did you do that with just Dustin? Jeremy?
Oh my gosh, I was really hoping you weren't going to ask me that question because I was just reading Pack It Up, Pachyderm.
I told you to turn off the chat.
I know. I turned it. I was like, please ask. Please, at the end of this, please say Beth.
I can answer the question for
That'd be great. Thank you, Beth.
I like to handle things. No, I think like you knew, we talked about how we could cross promote this. And so Dustin seemed like a great opportunity because we used the product. So he was on our list to contact, but we didn't reach out to him until closer to the time that the book was almost done and we were getting ready to launch. Wouldn't you say that's right, Jeremy?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. We're talking about Dustin.
Yeah.
Yes. So I reached out to Dustin and said, hey man, I use some of your products to do my illustrations. And now Diane's cracking me up laughing on the other screen. So I'm really trying to keep it cool here. I love Dustin. I heard him speak at Creative South, and they have great products, and he's got a great story. And I just thought I'd throw it out there and say, hey man, use some of your brushes along with some of my own, and I would love an opportunity to figure something out. And he said, well, how about a tutorial? And that was his idea. Mm-hmm. So I was like, all right, I've never done a tutorial before, but what the heck? And that also took a lot of time to do, but I enjoyed it.
How far in advance was that? Beth, how far in advance did you make this list of potential people that you could cross promote? And then Jeremy, how far in advance did you do that tutorial for Dustin?
I think the tutorial got to Dustin finalized Monday or Tuesday, and it went live Wednesday.
Okay. What about making the list of cross promoters? Because I actually feel like this is one of the weaknesses of me, where I'll just be like, I'm just going to try to do it all myself. I'm trying to crowd surf alone, where really we need to do. So it's that list, and it's being organized. Like, that's one of your superpowers for sure, Beth.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. That's definitely one of our superpowers.
I try, or I get too stressed out. So some of those things are actually accounts that I started following on Instagram when we initially talked about doing a book.
So a long time ago.
Well, okay. Some of them, yeah, because I wanted to see what kind of stuff are people posting. And I wanted to be well enough acquainted with their accounts to see, like, if our book would be something that would fit, or how other people are doing it. And then as we were getting closer and closer, we would just throw them in that list as we would think of them, so that we wouldn't forget. So it accumulated over time. I had a personal list. We made that list when we started really considering launching this in September. So probably like a month ago, I don't know, we made that list, and then we've just been adding to it. So it's a constant running thing.
Yeah.
So we're so over, but I just felt like there was so much content. I actually feel like I took lots of notes and even went on the backside. So I'm excited. You've actually inspired me to do a little bit more research for things that I'm doing. I hope that they've inspired everybody else that's in here live, and then anybody who's watching on YouTube or listening on iTunes or wherever get your podcast. I want to make sure that everybody knows how to get in touch with you guys. And I want to make sure that they know how to support. And you can still, because it's only been up for a week, people, you got 25 more days.
Yeah, just because we're funded doesn't mean we don't want to sell more books.
Right, because it's actually a great story. And it really is. They're super cute, but it is really a great story. And it does kind of have open-ended. So it's not like there's a beginning and an end. It's just I noticed something about my friend, and now I'm trying to figure it out. And sometimes you don't always know. And I think it is. One of you guys had sent me in an email that really is also a great book for adults, for sure. Mm-hmm. Maybe you give it to your boss one day. That'll be Casey giving it to Jeremy. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
So I want to make sure everybody knows. So Happy Cargo Books, HAPPYCARGO books with an S.com. And then you can follow Happy Cargo Books on Instagram. I'm going to put all these. So Happy Cargo Books is part of Ben and Beth Stafford at Fox Meadow Creative, which is FXMDW.com.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I'm going to put all these in the chat, but they'll also all be in the YouTube show notes and everything else, wherever you're getting this stuff. So if you want to back the project, I just made a bit.ly so that it was just easier, because every time I would copy it and paste it into my Messenger, it would pop up the whole thing and I'd lose the thing. So if you want to look, it's bit.ly, bit.ly/DR, capital D, capital R for Design Recharge, a hyphen, and then Chin-up, CHINUP. So that'll be an easy way. And then you can always follow Jeremy at slagledesign.com. Just one design, not an S on the end. So SLAGLE design.com. And then on Instagram at Slagle Design as well. So We talked about a couple other things. All those things will be in the show notes. Thank you guys so much for staying on a little bit longer. It was a lot of stuff to cover, but I felt like we did a good job.
I think so. That was a lot of fun.
Well, good. Beth, do you feel good about
Sorry,
the fun?
you froze at the end, so I was like, I don't know what you said, but yeah. No, yeah, that was really fun.
Okay, good. So I'm really thankful. I'm so thankful that you guys were able to get together. I'm sorry this had to take 2 years, but I am really thankful that Ben was involved, but I'm really glad Jeremy got involved. There he is, Ben's hand. Maybe Ben, just come into the frame so people can see you who don't know. There you are. Yay. At least he can hear now. But thank you guys for doing this. Thank you for all the support that they've gotten. I know that they're super thankful, and just this is a great little book. I can't wait to get mine. You can get more than one, so if you wanted to give it to a children's class, you can buy 20, I think, at once. There's some other things in those tiers, but there's I really am excited about the activity. There's digital activity sheets, and I know I said I don't have kids, but I sure do like the color, so I'm excited.
Awesome. Yes, and you can now see a preview of those rewards. We just uploaded that today, so that's new on the Kickstarter page. You can see what some of the activity kit items will be. Yep,
that literally went up like 20 minutes before we got on here. So,
all right. Well, and there Kickstarter does. I think this is Beth is doing these updates, and they're when you get funded, you get an update and all this stuff. So you're going to get updates for this whole month, and then when they start producing, and this is supposed to the books should be coming out before December, so you could get this as a Christmas gift as well, right?
Yes, that is the plan. Yeah.
Well, good luck. I will definitely be praying for you guys as this goes, and Ben too, since he's over in the shadows. Thank you guys. I can't wait. Hopefully we'll get to see you and hug you in person. Beth, I can't wait.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you guys for all coming. Next week is going to be a rapid recharge. It really will. I appreciate all the love I got from taking off last week. Anyway, thank you guys. You can always reach me at Design Recharge on Instagram or Twitter, or you can always follow me on, or you can email me or find me at rechargingyou.com. But next week is going to be a rapid recharge, and I'm going to teach what I've been learning. So it's not something I'm an expert at, but I'm definitely going to be teaching you what I've been understanding, because I feel like that's where God calls us to do, is right in the middle of your muck. Sometimes that's where you're learning it the best. So thank you guys for teaching us about Kickstarter. Tons of information, and just about having a team and somebody who you didn't necessarily plan on working with, especially when it seems like Ben would have been the perfect fit. So I think it's really a testament to y'all's relationship that he could step away and let Jeremy come in. So I think that was a really and it's great, because then you can more crowd surfing, right? Now you got 3 sets of hands instead of just 2.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, guys, thank you. And now, Jeremy, you can just read the chat all you want.
All right, sounds good.